There we go.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, the City Monona Plan Commission, Monday, January 25th. Would you please call the roll, Doug?
Chair Moore.
Here.
Alder Goforth.
Present.
Ms. Fox.
Here.
Mr. Holmquist.
Here.
Ms. Fallett.
Here.
Mr. Stein.
Here.
Mr. Homburg.
Here.
Mr. Peterson is excused.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from January 11th?
Move approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any corrections, changes, additions to the minutes? Chris?
This may sound minor, but it has a different meaning to me, Doug. So on page 5, the third paragraph from the bottom, it says, Mr. Homburg asked if WS would incorporate more brick into their design. I think it should be worded more like Mr. Homburg suggested WPS incorporate more brick into their design.
Got it.
Anything else? Any other changes, corrections, additions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the minutes carry. Next up is appearances. Doug, who do we have this evening?
So I received emails, and we'll go through those that would like to appear, and then I think we can call the project team. So the first that I have is Mr. David Israel.
David?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Basically just want to reiterate the same thing that I said last time. This is really a strong retail area. Everybody's talking about how much money will be put into, if the storage area goes, how much money will be put into that. I don't want you to lose the fact that we bought Southtown Mall basically out of foreclosure. And we put a lot of money into that shopping center to make it what it is today as well. I think you can say the same thing about the person, and I forgot his name, but the gentleman who bought the office plaza, office complex who spoke last time. You know, since we've been there, we put in Planet Fitness, we put in Chase Bank, we put in Hockey Giant. Dollar Tree was renovated. So, I mean, we've done a ton of work over there. And my biggest concern is if we change the zoning on this to a storage area, I'm going to lose tenants, and my part of the mall will be not leased, and we'll have the same conversation that we're going to have tonight when I lose Hobby Lobby or lose somebody else because we've gone storage area there. I can't reiterate the fact that you're on the Beltline. The Beltline has 125,000 cars a day. We have the back of the property has signs on all the tenants over there. This is a retail area. It should stay a retail area. You'll hear from Sandy Golden. You'll hear from Peter Glazer about how much retail is out there in big boxes and how many deals still are alive in the retail field. So we all think retail is, leaving. Lots of retail is leaving, but the core retail will stay there forever. And that's basically my 2 minutes of what I wanted to tell you. So.
Thank you, David.
Next, we have Ms. Sandy Golden of CBRE.
Sandy?
I would like Peter to go first. He has some statistical information that I think will be helpful.
All right, great. Thank you, Sandy. And thank you for giving me another opportunity to speak tonight. Again, I'm Peter Glazer. I'm with CBRE. I specialize in retail commercial real estate brokerage. And really within that, I specialize in leasing vacant big box retail buildings. At the last Plan Commission meeting, there was some question raised about the demand for big box retail space in the market. As a follow-up to this question, I did some research on the number of new big box retail openings and announcements in the Madison area. I found that during 2020, there were several retailers that either opened or announced plans to open stores greater than 50,000 square feet in the market. These retailers and locations include At Home opened in the former Shopko on the east side in 94,000 square feet. Hobby Lobby is opening this year in 53,000 square feet of the former Sears at Westtown Mall. Also at Westtown, Von Bauer recently confirmed that it will open a new 85,000 square foot store next year, replacing the former Boston store. Hy-Vee is on the verge of opening a 58,000 square foot store in Wanakee. Recently announced plans for a 90,000 square foot store in Sun Prairie. Meijer announced a new 160,000 square foot store on McKee Road in Fitchburg. Costco also announced a third Madison area location consisting of 150,000 square feet in Verona. This represents a total of 7 major retailers over 50,000 square feet, consisting of a total of just under 700,000 square feet of space. In addition, Floor & Decor Outlet has interest in an 80,000 square foot store in Monona. I conducted the same survey for the entire state and found that Madison accounted for half of the big box activity in Wisconsin. I also looked into the big box vacancy in the area. There are currently 6 vacant big box spaces, and big box being 50,000 square feet or greater in Madison for a total of 550,000 square feet. This includes the former Shopko in Monona that we're talking about. Also, over half of this vacancy is part of 3 buildings that are attached to East Town Mall and really the backside of the mall. So, very difficult space to lease. In addition to this, I did a CoStar survey today. CoStars are call it our MLS of commercial real estate and tracks all the data. According to this CoStar report, Dane County currently has an overall retail vacancy rate of just under 4%. This is extremely low, and by far and away the lowest figure in all of Wisconsin. Madison is and will continue to be the healthiest retail market for brick and mortar retail demand due to several factors, including the strong economy and the highest population growth in the state. These numbers show that there are demand for larger retail space in this market. Major retailers such as Kohl's, Hobby Lobby, and Walmart feel that the Southtown area is a strong retail location for their stores. The former Shopko at Southtown should remain a retail location that will continue to serve this community. If anyone would like a copy of this study, please contact me and I can share this information with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Peter. Sandy?
Thank you also. I just want to remind everyone that there was, from the last meeting, 36 letters opposing development, 1 neutral, and no one spoke, no one from the community, none of the neighbors, none of the residents, none of the businesses, none of the tenants spoke for this zoning or for the change in zoning, or we're excited to have a new storage facility in this community at this location. If all the neighbors, all the tenants, all the property owners are concerned, and there is an exciting new retailer that has proposed an opportunity to be in your neighborhood with a viable commodity that would be interesting for the community, I don't understand why you would want to change. Addressing retail again, 18 to 24 months is not a long time to find a tenant, to establish a structure for a deal, and to come to terms and close a deal. And in the middle of that 24 months, you had a pandemic. Peter just listed for you all the various tenants that actually did sign deals this past year, 2020. For retail here. We actually even have other tenants that have expressed their concern. It's been typical in my experience that zoning changes usually are done to fix a problem. I don't think anything's broken here. And I hope that you will listen to the community, listen to the property owners, listen to the tenants, and be sensitive to the effect this may have on your real estate property taxes and on your local businesses that may end up being hurt the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Next, we have Ms. Julie Stosinski.
Good evening, everybody. I'm the Director of Construction Design and Entitlements at Floor & Decor. I was here at the last hearing. I'm here tonight as well. More here tonight just to make sure that you guys, if you have any questions about Floor & Decor, to ask me directly. We are very much interested in this property. We've been very much interested in Monona for quite some time, so we're trying our best to be able to open our next store in this area. I do want to stress to Peter and David's point that we're one of Fortune's top 100 fastest growing companies during the pandemic. We are constantly opening stores. We're slated to open 30 this year. I'm just hoping that you guys consider the fact that we would like to make Monona our home for our next location. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Julie. Doug?
I don't have anybody else aside from the applicant's project team listed to speak, but I see there's a lot of folks on the line.
Right. So is there anyone else here to speak who did not previously register to do so? Okay. Hearing none. I'm going to close the appearances and go to number 5, unfinished business, public hearing on the request by Devon Self Storage LLC for approval of a zoning permit for new use at 2101 West Broadway, case number 2-015-2020. Greg or Dan, who's speaking first for you all tonight?
I'll let Greg go ahead and kick us off. Greg has a colleague and partner with him on the meeting tonight as well, Tom, who may wish to speak after Greg. And then I'll give some comments at the end. If that's okay, Chair Moore.
Okay, thank you.
Great, I thank you for your time and I appreciate the position that you are in. But one of the things that I would be happy to share with you and my colleague Joe Binder, who is our investment partner with Inland Private Capital, will follow me. But after our last meeting, I decided to look at CBRE's forecast for 2021 retail. And it shed a different light on what has been said heretofore. It talked about foreclosures and closures exceeding the 9,800 that occurred in 2019. It also projected that over the next 5 years, 20% of retail in America will close and go away. It talked about the need for local jurisdictions to be prepared for adaptive reuse and to really give some consideration to their zoning regulations. So while I appreciate what Ms. Golden and Mr. Glazier have said, it contradicts everything that their corporate operation has predicted for not just this year, but for the next 5 years. So I think that bears some type of review. With that being said, my cohort, Joe Binder, would like to present the the high points of the write-up that he sent to you, because I think it's important to also identify their position in the state of Wisconsin, how many assets they own, and the fact that they are one of the largest retail owners in America. So they have boots on the ground and they're in a number of states knowing exactly what is occurring in the retail sector. While I appreciate what you have with respect to your zoning regulations that were put together in 2016, I don't know that those regulations could have contemplated what was going to happen to the retail market itself, and certainly what the pandemic would do to move that spiral along. So With that being said, I'd like to turn the time over to Joe Binder. The other thing as an adjunct that I would like to mention was brought up in the last meeting that how do we know that Devon will actually generate or create out parcels? This won't be a situation that when they get what they want for storage, that those will just sit dormant. I'm willing to tell you on a very open basis that we're willing to deed the parking area to the Community Development Authority to do with it whatever they please. That gives you the greatest and highest degree of security that we could possibly provide. So with that being said, Joe, if you wouldn't mind.
Great. Thanks, Greg. I'm Joe Binder with Inland Private Capital. So we're located in Oak Brook, Illinois. Our offices are in the western suburbs here of Chicago. And so, yeah, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak with the Plan Commission today about the proposed self-storage project that we're partnered with Devon on. And so first, some brief context on Inland. So we're a private, homegrown Midwest company that's still owned and operated by the 4 founding principals that were actually the school teachers before they started in the real estate business. And so Inland Real Estate Investment and Management Firm covers all aspects of real estate, and that's over a 50-year history. Personally, I've been with the company for nearly 13 years now. And as Greg mentioned, we do have a large presence in Wisconsin. We have over 30 properties in Wisconsin. In addition, we have many employees that have come from Wisconsin, and personally, I have family and friends that live in the Madison suburban area. So I certainly value the opportunity to be able to present to the commission and be part of a project, hopefully, within this area. And so I was able to listen to and rewatch the last meeting and really appreciated the thoughtfulness and measured approach that the Plan Commission is taking, as well as the public input, Would feel it's important to share our company's perspective on the project, as Greg had mentioned, and our commitment to the project, because certainly I think there is some maybe misconception with respect to the storage use. And so Inland's been involved in every asset class, and I think when I listened to the discussion before, it was also not just about the project, but about retail. And if it's one thing that Inland knows well, it is retail. If you look back at the late 90s and 2000s, Inland and its affiliates are one of the largest owner-operators of shopping centers in the country. And we also have a fully integrated property management team as well. So Inland is definitely a proponent of physical retail, and particularly with respect to the neighborhood shopping center, which made up most of our portfolio. That said, though, our focus on retail has evolved, and it's certainly narrowed as the landscape has shifted. Unfortunately, we've seen the struggles with retail shopping centers, where a center, unfortunately, becomes better known for what it used to have rather than what it still offers. And certainly, this Bake and Shop Co. could become that with it being kind of a prominent eyesore. So as we've seen this, it's happened across the country in all kinds of markets, not specific to one setting or another. And it's really stemmed from obviously the transition to a lot more online retail. And obviously it's been exacerbated by cyclical events like the Great Recession and the pandemic. And what's left is a lot of excess retail space, as Greg had cited. And certainly some of the comments that were on behalf of Mr. Israel painted a picture of more of a half glass full approach to retail. But as Greg had pointed out, it's really just not representative of the firm level view at CBRE or their independent view. Greg had cited the significant amount of store closures in 20 and 21, and that's coming off a pre-pandemic record in 2019. And he mentioned that their view on conversion of this excess retail space to alternative uses. And I think it's also worth noting, and we shared this with the Plan Commission, that we had an independent appraisal report done by CBRE well in advance of coming to the city as part of our due diligence. And there they cite some of the same metrics that Greg had pointed out in the CBRE reports, that as far as highest and best use, they're coming to a similar conclusion that is just not retail. And to touch on some local market statistics, also from CoStar, Peter had referenced some statistics with respect to the Madison market. But I think it's worth noting that with respect to that vacancy, it has been on an increase trend since 2018, and that rental rates in the market have actually been on the decline since late 15. And I think Janine, the current landowner, can attest to this and how challenging of a market it currently is, with really the only interest that surfaced is the floor and decor, which was for less than the entire space, and as we know, not economically feasible. And I think it's worth noting as well that with this big box space, we've seen a trend for most big box retailers to move to a smaller footprint, making this more obsolete. Kohl's, for example, has moved to a more efficient, streamlined store footprint that is more cohesive with their omni-channel retail strategy. So clearly there's little to no options for this type of big box anymore in its current state. And as Greg pointed out, these are trends that have moved quickly and have materially accelerated over the last several years. So even a comprehensive plan memorialized in 2016 really couldn't have anticipated this type of movement. But the takeaway there is that there is success for these spaces, and it's predicated on conversion to that alternate or complementary use. And this has been unfolding within real estate across many projects. And we see the best performing projects, the most impactful centers, are the ones that have that mix of uses and different ways to engage with the consumer. So it's not just about the retail adapting, though, it's other asset classes as well. So with storage, for example, we view it and we believe it has conformed to a retail operation. So storage is essentially fitting into that same retail box, but in its new form. So the Class A storage facility that Devin has designed really brings the commodity of space to a retail setting, and it has that focus on comfortable, efficient, safe experience for the consumer, both when they're in store and for their possessions after they leave. And as well as being focused on the in-store consumer engagement, Devin will also drive traffic to the store through web and mobile-based communication strategies similar to the omni-channel retailers today. So in addition to this close physical and strategic alignment with retail, I do want to also point out that there's overlap on the customer profile. This was another data point that we had shared with the Plan Commission in advance of the meeting. And we pulled some information from Self-Storage Association's demand study. And what it did is that it characterized the self-storage user. And I think a couple things are worth noting. I won't go through all the different characteristics that we had laid out, but if you look at the characteristics, particularly in the Midwest region, they overlap well with the consumer that I think we view as the Madison, Monona market area consumer. And in addition, in what may be contrary to maybe the initial thought with respect to the storage user, is that an overwhelming majority of people that use storage live in a single family residence. They have basements, they have garages. So it just shows that space is a commodity and there is this overlap with the consumer in the marketplace. And certainly with the unique drive-in Class A facility that Devin has designed, this will attract from a larger radius and really bring new customers to Southtown Mall that maybe wouldn't have otherwise gone to that location. And I think it's also important to note that there is a storage need among the local businesses as well. That includes the neighboring retail and office tenants. So I know at the prior meeting, Mr. Reinman, I believe, from Lakestone Properties, the owner of the Southtown Office Park next door to the Shopco, he had commented on the project. Now I believe Lakestone also owns a couple of older format self-storage facilities in the Madison area. Now, I'm not sure if they'll be impacted by this proposed project or not, but regardless, he had a negative view towards the project. However, based on our experience, and Devin and Greg can attest to this, there will be, or we firmly believe there will be significant amount of demand from regional and small tenants that that are the type that occupy that office park next door. They will see this as an amenity to have climate-controlled storage next door that they can use for a variety of uses, such as excess supplies or equipment or inventory or file storage. And so we consistently see this across our portfolio. And I think maybe it's an obvious point, but that business owner or representative that would visit the storage facility will also double as an individual consumer. So there'll certainly be a cross visit to Kohl's or Pure Hockey or any of the other tenants in Southtown Mall. And I think the other important thing we want to stress is the stability that our retail self-storage concept can provide to the shopping center. Storage demand is driven by life events and is necessity-based. So it won't have the same cyclical swings with the economy that other retail does. So both in good times or bad times, these life events can occur that will require storage use. So just as a few examples, if you're changing homes, whether it be moving to a new bigger home or downsizing, there could be that transitional need or permanent need for additional storage use. Or a family having a new child or an adult child moving back into the home could obviously require the use of storage space. And then I think something we're all experiencing to some extent is the pandemic and the effect it's had on our home lives with needing a little more space for a home office. And to continue with the concept around stability with respect to our proposed storage facility, I want to focus on how it interplays with the ongoing nature of our business model. So as a potential owner, we'd be making a sizable investment in the property, and it would be for the benefit of our own operating the business. So there's that alignment between the investment in the real estate and the operations that are ongoing. And that's unique because it would not be the case with the traditional retail tenant. Because they're, and we've seen it with Floor and Decor, and again, no fault of theirs, but just by the nature of the retail environment, they're looking for as little investment, if any, upfront, and obviously rents that are below market to make it as economically feasible for them to operate in what is a stressed retail environment. So unfortunately, that's the landscape. However, again, with our business model that's proposed for a retail storage site, we'll have that alignment of interests on both sides between operation and investment and be heavily invested in the site. So to close out my comments, I do want to highlight our view that just as important as how credible and cohesive our project can be and how it can serve the space needs of those in the community, I think it's important to stress the sponsorship and the people behind the project that are going to be just as important to the success of Southtown Shopping Center. So I can say Inland and Devon will unequivocally have a long-term commitment to the site. And that's generally our nature, but I can say it with surety here because as a function of our investment structure, the Opportunity Zone tax legislation guides us for a long-term investment hold. And over that long-term horizon, we're here to build up the retail environment for the benefit of our project and the entire center. We'll leverage our retail experience. We'll try to bring the outlots to a reality, whether that be through our own efforts or as Greg had mentioned, other methods that we can collaborate with the city on. And we would look to collaborate with Mr. Israel and Kohl's to build a cohesive retail environment and engage with the community, whether that be through promotional materials or events or other efforts. So obviously the Plan Commission is making a decision on a zoning permit, but it's really the deciding factor in our investment. Unfortunately, there's not a re-tenanting business plan that exists. And I think Janine in the last meeting, the current owner had highlighted and made it clear that there's no other options that exist in the foreseeable future for the property. So to that end, we see the zoning permit approval as serving as the catalyst for the shopping center and retail on the west side of Monona. It'll be the catalyst for our investment. It'll be the catalyst for new stability of the shopping center through our retail storage operation. And it'll be the catalyst for new retail outlets. And we hope it'll be the catalyst for a long-term retail partnership between the Inland and Devon teams and Southtown Mall and the community. So again, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone and your thoughtful consideration on this. And obviously happy to answer any questions, and I know Greg and Dan may have something to add at this point.
Thank you, Joseph. Dan?
Thank you, Chair Moore. I have just 4 points that I'd like to highlight in my presentation. First, and I think most importantly, both the city's comprehensive plan and the city's CDD zoning district allow for a mixture of uses, including this proposed storage use. So there's been a lot of testimony about a preference for retail, but it's important, I think, to note that the city's plan doesn't mandate retail uses at this location. Let me just briefly quote from the comprehensive plan. Quote, "The Broadway corridor is zoned community design district, which is a flexible district allowing a compatible mix of residential, commercial, industrial, or open space uses, which realize the goals of the comprehensive plan." Second point, the proposed redevelopment here satisfies a number of the specific recommendations that are contained in the city's plan, including, quote, "eliminating obsolete or deteriorating buildings," and, quote, "encouraging redevelopment projects that will have a positive impact on the city's tax base and character." The third point I want to emphasize tonight is that we believe the proposed redevelopment here satisfies each of the CDD performance standards that are contained in your zoning code. I won't go into each of those standards in detail, but I will direct your attention to the written summary that we submitted for the record that does just that, going point by point through the performance standards in the code. And finally, I want to end with a reminder that zoning decisions, as tough as they are, they're not a popularity contest. It's not a question of counting how many people are in favor and how many people are opposed to a particular project and then making a decision accordingly. Instead, the law is what controls here, and it's the law that requires that zoning decisions be made based on the adopted plan for the community and on the current zoning regulations. So here, we're not asking for a zoning change. We're asking for a zoning permit. The property is zoned CDD, it's in the community design district. And because we believe the proposed use satisfies all of the applicable criteria that are in your plan and in your ordinance, we're respectfully requesting your approval tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Is that everyone in your group that wished to speak at the public hearing?
I think so. Greg, is there?
Greg, anything else that you wanted to say before we close the public hearing?
No, ma'am. We're fine, and we thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone being here tonight. Is there anyone else here that wanted to speak in the public hearing portion of this evening?
Can I ask one thing?
Yes, David, you may.
One of the things I forgot to mention before is that Floor and Decor, I believe, will employ over 50 employees in the.
No, you said you were going to ask a question, David.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you, that's fine. I just wanted to make that point of something I wanted to talk to before, where the storage unit, in response to Mr. Binder's comment, was that, and I believe Greg said the first time that they may get 10 cars a day there.
David, I can't, I'm sorry, sir, but we're not in the hearing section anymore. If you had a question, I'm happy to entertain it. Thank you.
I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I'm going to close the public hearing on the request and open a consideration of action on the request by Devon Storage LLC or approval of a zoning permit for new use at 2101 West Broadway, case number 2-015-2020. Doug.
Thank you, Chair Moore. I'll just give a very brief overview. I won't go back through the staff report, but I'd just encourage the Commission to discuss the compatibility of the proposed land use with both the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan. And just for the record, for everyone that's joined us, the full packet is on the city website. Attachment 2 includes all of the received public comment to date, and that includes from the last meeting. And then attachments 5 and 6 were referenced by the applicants during the public hearing. There's both the letter from Mr. O'Callaghan as well as the letter on behalf of the capital partner. So all those materials are on the website, included in the packet. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Before I open it up to the committee, I just have a couple of things I want to say. One is I just want to remind everybody, and this is very germane to me asking David to stop speaking a second ago, which is that, again, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to be focused on, as I wrote to you after the last meeting, and I would remind everybody again tonight, what has been presented during appearances or in other parts of the meeting related to other potential options should not be part of our decision this evening. What we're asked to do is decide this permit, this application on its own merits. And obviously those merits being very much tied to the performance standards, which are also tied to our comprehensive plan. So and the application does not include the 2 outbuildings. While they're drawn into the plans, I just want to remind everybody to stay focused on the task at hand. With that, I have one question, and I'm going to turn it over to the committee, and I'd like, when I do so, for committee members to just give us I guess a take on where you're currently sitting with this application in front of us. So my question actually, I guess specifically would go to Joseph, because in your writings to us at the end of last week, as well as tonight, you spoke, and Greg spoke last week as well, regarding the demand for self-storage in this type of facility. And while that, frankly, is not part of our concern, it was a big part of your presentation. So I want to follow up on that simply to reference an article. There was a B2, the business of business article in April 20 that spoke specifically about the fact that the self-storage industry is actually waning, and that in Wisconsin specifically, self-storage is down by close to 33%. The notion with a significant increase, and actually a 56% increase in vacancies, due to people not moving as much and actually shedding a lot of their things in COVID. So I'm wondering if nothing else, if that's something that you're familiar with, and if that's something that you're considering when you're weighing, again, since that was a big part of your proposal, if you could just, are you aware of that?
Sure. I'd be happy to address that. Actually, we're finding that to be to the contrary. What's occurred in all of our stores across the country is that our occupancies, rather than declining based on any type of seasonality, have continued to remain stable. The only thing that's really changed during the last 9 months is that prior to that, people self-identified that they saw our facilities based upon signage, based upon their driving by a facility, going to school, church, soccer practice, whatever the case might be. What has happened is that people during the pandemic have not moved out. So our occupancies have actually increased over that time. Across the board, we're at stabilized occupancy, which in our industry is considered anywhere from 85 to 90%. So I don't see that to be the case. We just closed on a property in Milwaukee last week, and in that particular market, things are stable. So we don't have an interest in going into a market that's on the decline. So I don't see anything that justifies in our industry based on that article. It wouldn't be supported.
Yep, and I would just echo Greg's comments. Our portfolio includes properties in Milwaukee and throughout the Midwest. And our portfolio does have a stabilized occupancy at 89, 90%. It has maintained that through the pandemic. So yeah, I can't necessarily speak to the specifics of that article. That maybe seeing some more data points, but yeah, across the board, we have seen consistent demand throughout the pandemic.
With that, I'm going to open it up to the committee. So Rob, would you like to start? Sorry. Just about to take a drink and I apologize.
No is the answer. I don't want to start, but I will. This is tough, as everybody knows, and there is a lot of information that continues to come in studies and articles and trends and differings of opinions about what's actually happening. I'll reiterate kind of what I had said and what Chair Moore had said about the application as it stands, showing the potential outlot developments and all that are really not of consequence. Having intentions to do that doesn't really affect our decision because the application is for a zoning permit for a single use in one property, not outlot development. That would justify a general development plan, which is not what this is. This is self-storage occupying the Shopko space. What I struggle with on this one is that it's not that this, I don't see this as a retail use. It's spelled out as light industrial in our city documents. It's zoned as commercial retail. I don't think it will draw a lot of cross usership, and I don't want to ignore the outpouring of public comment. In 6 years, this is the most public comment I've ever seen being on Plan Commission, almost entirely against this, which includes many of your neighbors, which you claim to be will be a synergistic development. There seems to be a lot of concerns about the validity of that. And I have my own concerns. There's not going to be a lot of traffic, I don't think, based upon past comments and meetings. And looking at our land use map, and it's does it check some boxes in our CDD and comprehensive plan? It can, if worded correctly. I absolutely, and it does. Increase tax base versus an empty lot. Absolutely. It's also, like I stated before, an industrial use in a commercial shopping center with commercial uses all next door. And do we want to open up a pocket of purple on our land use maps where in future land use maps, it's commercial retail, not industrial, purple being industrial, which I don't think we do. I don't think I want the trend to be for the Southtown Center to become an industrial use, light industrial use. Now, with trends in retail and retail space, again, we're getting very conflicting reports about the state of that in this region, which is what I care about, not nationally, is you've exposed something with this application that requires its due diligence and findings of fact of whether we want to re-examine the uses of this space. I know it falls into the CDD area, but there's CDD areas along Monona Drive, and I don't think we'd ever consider having self-storage there. So in short, I'm going to leave it at that for now. I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Chris?
Okay, I'm unmuted. As everybody said, this is a tough one tonight. I first will address the applicant mentioned that our comp plan allows industrial zoning in the CDD district. He's absolutely right, it does. It allows it as a compatible mix. It doesn't require it. I think the key to remember is it doesn't require a particular use. It's an allowed use if we feel it's compatible with the surrounding uses and the vision of the city. This is probably our largest CDD district in the city. We've got the WPS campus to the east and a small office complex next to that. We've got major retail in here. And I'm a little concerned what we do for their future when we plop the light industrial use right in the middle. And the light industrial use, I like the development team. I like what they're proposing. I just don't really think it belongs here. I said it last meeting, I really wish it was on the south side of the Beltline in our industrial park. It would be a great use. And a couple of reasons are, one, I'll reiterate what Rob said. And I've been on the commission for almost 30 years and I haven't seen this much feedback from the public. We love it when the public gives us feedback and they rarely do. And I've not seen this much feedback that I can remember in almost 30 years. And there's a reason we have public hearings. We do want to hear what the public thinks. We have a very flexible zoning ordinance and we need to use our best judgment to apply it properly. I think the community's vision is clearly not for self-storage in this area. I think while we have allowed some industrial, small areas of industrial in certain areas, the size and scope of this overwhelms this area into that type of a use. I think we've invested, the county's invested a substantial amount of money in major infrastructure, particularly transportation in that area. And while that's not a negative necessarily to the project, we've invested a lot of money in something that's not being used to its highest potential. What I mean by that is, I don't know what the future of this site is. I do not know what the future of retail is. But I know that the community's vision for the future of this site is something bigger and bolder. We're looking for employment centers. We're looking for people. We're looking for activity there. We're on the Beltline, which has thousands of cars per day. There aren't a lot of sites like that. If we use up one of the few sites we have, where do we go? Perhaps this ends up being a major office park. Perhaps WPS expands it. Perhaps it stays retail. Perhaps it becomes an entertainment district. Those are all things I can see happening in this area. I'm not sure how I see self-storage helping that come to fruition. And of course, we have to talk about jobs. One thing we want to do with our commercial districts is generate jobs. And this clearly doesn't do a very good job of generating jobs. So I think you know where I'm heading with this. I'd like, again, to hear what the rest of the commission has to say. But right now, I'm having a hard time finding this a compatible use with existing businesses in the area.
Chris? Christine?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I definitely agree with the sentiments of my colleagues. I think, the sheer enormity of the project causes me concern. And at the last meeting, I asked about your feasibility study or your market study and showing a demand for this volume of storage units, which you assured me that your team is pros, but without me having access to that and seeing that, I just question the high number of units. Can you tell me how many units are laid out in that floor plan?
Yes. First, from a global standpoint, approximately 4.5 square feet per capita of self-storage in a 3-mile market in the Monona area. The national average is 8 square feet. So you're roughly half of the national average. In this particular location, we would have in excess of 800 units. While that may seem like a lot, the overall saturation in the market is half of the national average. So, you have to look at all things before you make a decision on that.
Okay. I think you mentioned your other facilities are 80 to 90% occupied. Are those comparable in size, like 100,000 square feet?
About half of our portfolio is in adaptive reuse, so the answer is yes.
Okay.
When we've converted big box, whether they be Kmart, Walmart, Pace warehouses, in this case Shopkos, yes, they're generally 85 to 90,000 square feet.
Okay. The other two pieces that give me concern are item 4E in our community design district, which states that you must serve regional and community needs for employment. And I know I mentioned this last meeting was, Shopko employed over 50 people. And so it would be nice to see something comparable there. And then attachment 5 in our packet states that our community design district encourages infill development on vacant parcels to maximize efficient use of public services and facilities, but that's questionable with that only being 2 employees there. So I do struggle with that piece. I'm wondering if you have explored any alternative configurations for the space, say fewer storage units and a retail unit.
Well, we've explored those, but everything is predicated upon, one, the investment that's being made. So, the alternative is to utilize the out parcels. What goes hand in hand with that is your tax base. Today, we're at $100,000. As Joe mentioned, we're going to be in there for 10 years or more. By the end of the 10th year, we're at $450,000 in a tax base. So, I think that, while it might be nice to have some alternative there, you also have to take a look at how we positively improve your tax base.
Yeah, I'm definitely hearing you on that. I think, though, it is really important that we listen to public sentiment. And I think, there is also, I guess I'm a little confused about the outlots and the agreement that is in place with McDonald's and the other retailers. And so I guess, overall, I still have questions and concerns, but I thank you for the additional information.
Thank you, Christine. Brian, you get double the time since you missed us last week or 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Oh, don't worry. I went back and watched it more than once to make sure I was aware of what you guys discussed. And I think some of the pieces you guys have already talked about of, where it is that we as a commission kind of need to start. And I think there's a couple pieces that have been a little bit distracting for us as a group in the sense of talking about a wider mix of outlots. What are these outlots going to be? All the information around demand. There's probably 90% of what has been shared at the last meeting and this meeting that doesn't get to the key piece, which is future use. Like Rob hit it square on the head. What is the intended future use? What is our kind of zoning. And if we take CDD, exactly. If we threw in the mix the outlots and you were coming to us with a GDP and you were saying, hey, we're looking at the whole ball of wax here. And here are all the different pieces that we want to put together. And storage is one component of it. And these are all these other pieces that are connected to it. That's a different story. But we're talking about a single location with a single change in zoning. And that's the piece that I think is the most concerning for us as a plan commission, of looking at where is it that we have intended that, what is it that we've intended for that location, and what are we intending for that location going forward. I don't take light the comments, meaning like, I think you guys are square on. You know, whenever you make a plan in the city, by the time the ink is dried on that plan, you're ready to kind of relook at that plan of like what's coming down next for us. And we've talked as a commission about our Broadway corridor plan a variety of different times, looking at, is there enough flexibility throughout the whole stretch of the Broadway corridor? You know, what's right at this end of Broadway corridor may be different than what's at the other end of the corridor. However, what we have to guide us right now is what we have to guide us right now. So for those uses, like, I just think this is the wrong location. I love the project. Don't get me wrong. I think the project's wonderful. I think the design team's wonderful. I think the investment, like, you have everything lined up, like, right for a project like this. Just not to kind of shoehorn within a retail shopping center. I think it's just really tough for us within the scope of our city as well. If you're looking at a different type of city, a different type of situation where industrial might be able to be tacked on the back of a zoning area that you haven't then developed, and you're looking at what is it that we would expand beyond that, you have a whole different story. So with those pieces, I just have concerns with us making a change in the land use aspect.
Thank you, Brian. Maureen?
Good evening, everyone. I have a few things, I think, you know, some similar things that have already been said by the other commissioners tonight, but there's a few things that haven't been touched on. I think I spent a lot of time since our last meeting really going through our comprehensive plan and taking a look at our zoning code again. And I wanted to call out just a few things that I saw, which are leading me in a similar direction where I just have concerns about the, you know, granting a permit for this site for this use. You know, when we take a look at our zoning code and we look at the characteristics of the district, yes, as Chris pointed out, it does allow for that. However, it also says we have to realize the goals of the comprehensive plan. And when we also look a little further at our community design district 48030B2, it says that the development shall occur according to a large scale plan rather than on a piecemeal basis. And given that we're talking about just a permit here, that's, you know, we need to be looking at our plan. So then when you look at our comprehensive plan, our future land use map does show that the intention of this area is what we've been talking about. The intention is for it to be a commercial area. And, you know, one of the things that was said earlier is that our plan does allow for a mixture of uses as long as those are compatible and consistent to allow us to realize the goals of the community. And when you look at our goals, like the goals are very broad, of course, you know, because that's how goals are written. But when you look at 6.2.1, that's an objective within the comp plan. It encourages commercial development and redevelopment that will provide quality jobs, goods, and services needed by residents, and to discourage unnecessary duplication of facilities. And then a policy within that is that each commercial parcel shall optimize its economic value in terms of the revenue it generates and its assessed value while maintaining appropriate land use and the relationship to the community. So again, I think there's some, there's a comment there about, you know, you're presenting us with a lot of information about how it's optimizing economic value in terms of revenue. And I think there's, you know, there's always going to be disagreements on what's going to bring the most economic value in. But when I look at that part where it talks about the relationship to the community, that part to me really is that focus on compatibility. And we've heard from the neighbors in that site, and that's the community of businesses in that area. And they don't feel that this is a compatible use as well. And Dan had mentioned that, you know, we have to look at the law, and we do have to look at the law, but in Wisconsin, our law does require that if we have any program or action that affects land use, it states this in the comprehensive plan on page 9.2, any program or action must be consistent with our comprehensive plan. And our comprehensive plan at this point does show that the future land use there is commercial. I have a couple other things that I wanted to point out, I guess, too. One additional item is in the zoning ordinance under 480-30B 4B. But it talks about how all uses and the intensity, appearance, and arrangement shall be of a visual and operational character which would produce an attractive environment of sustained aesthetic and ecological desirability, economic stability, and functional practicality compatible with the general policy guidelines of the comprehensive plan, as well as the specific concerns expressed by the community. The plan shows that it's supposed to be commercial. We've heard a lot of feedback from our community. And, you know, as Chris and Rob mentioned in their time on the commission, they've never had so many comments. We can't discount that. And we also can't discount the comments of the neighboring businesses as well. So this is a very tricky one, but when I look through our comprehensive plan and think about our ordinance, it really seems like the use intended for this site is not for self-storage. On the other hand, you know, our industrial district, Chris has mentioned, you know, if this was going on the other part or the other side of the belt line, this would be awesome. I think this would just be a great fit. That district, when you look at our code, it says that it is designed to provide for highway-oriented activities. And I don't know if you would describe your facility as highway-oriented, but to me, the fact that the individuals who are coming to your site stay in their vehicle, drive into the building, do whatever they need to do, get back in their vehicle and leave, to me, that seems much more highway oriented than a retail or commercial use. So I have concerns about granting the permit for this, given what we have as a community put forward in our plan and our ordinances. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Corinne. Susan Fox.
Okay, and I apologize for disappearing briefly. My internet connection broke. So anyway, I missed some of the commentary, but I don't think I have a lot to add to what's already been said. You know, our role on the Plan Commission is to give full consideration to the project, and make decisions based on the best interests of the entire community. And we certainly, while you can argue that this use might be allowable, as Chris pointed out, I just don't see it as compatible with the retail businesses that are there. It doesn't really serve the community design district goal of needs for more employment. That's a piece of it. That plan also talks about it being a large scale plan, not piecemeal, and the plan was for a shopping center. That's how it's described. The Broadway corridor plan talks about enhancing the market appeal of West Broadway and to continue to build a larger shopper base. Cross easement agreement, which I don't know whether anybody referred to that again tonight. I know we did last week. Again, treats that entire area. It's an agreement signed by Shopko and the developer and McDonald's as treating that as one site. And I think we need to look at it that way. So as everyone else has already reiterated, this is a very attractive proposal, I think, for a different location as well. I think, you know, you've put a lot of thought into it. It is appealing, but I just don't see it as fitting into this location in terms of the way our plans are currently laid out. I just don't think it's compatible. That's where I am at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. So I'm personally, as chair, I'm sitting here thinking, given all Chris, I think, and Rob referenced it right off the bat, we've received a lot of competing information about its fit and its not fit to obviously to our plans, to our interests as a city, to its attractiveness is retail, not retail, jobs, small jobs, etc. And just for me, I'm wanting to, I guess I'm wondering if it makes sense to impose on Doug as our staff person to table it this evening, and Doug, wondering if you might take all the additional data that we've learned tonight and provide us with a finding of facts, an analysis based on the rest of the information that we've heard this evening, the competing information, frankly, again, that we've heard this evening. As much as I hate to delay it, I personally would feel a little better tabling it. That's a suggestion. I'm willing to certainly willing to consider other options, and would consider a motion for the same from the committee if that's amenable. I just feel like, you know, I'm hearing some people still sitting on the fence. This is a big decision. We have a lot to weigh. And I feel like there's been a fair amount of competing data thrown at us again tonight that I would like some analysis on. So I guess my recommendation would be to table it. But again, Chris?
I guess I didn't hear many people on the fence. I think I heard a lot of people that are like this proposal. I'm one of them. I just don't like it here. And I heard a lot of that, but I didn't hear anybody tonight that thought that they would consider approving a zoning permit for this use in this location. Maybe
Okay.
I misheard.
Okay. That being the case, since you are the master of findings of facts.
I'm not a master, and all I can put down is what I know and what I heard tonight. If you want a motion and if you think it's not sufficient, then let's, you know, people can vote against it.
That's right.
Or we can, maybe nobody will even second it.
Okay, great. Would you like to propose a motion?
I'm just saying, I'm not trying to hurry this along. I think the applicants deserve an answer, and at least a standing where the commission is tonight.
Sure.
Instead of continuing to, I'm not trying to string it along. I didn't hear anybody that I felt their mind would be changed
Okay,
by 2-week wait.
okay.
So I'll move denial. And based on the following findings of fact, that 1, the community's vision for this area is retail, office, and entertainment. 2, the proposed use is industrial. 3, while the Plan Commission may allow the introduction of some other uses into the CDD zoning district, it's not obligated to do so. 4, the size and scope of the proposed use is likely to have an adverse effect on the adjacent uses. Did I say 4 or 5? That's 4. 5, the proposed use will not generate a significant number of jobs. And 6, the proposed use does not make adequate use of the significant transportation infrastructure that's already in place.
There is a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Rob. Any further discussion from the committee?
Now might be an appropriate time for the other commissioners to mention if there's a finding of fact that they believe isn't in the original motion.
Yes, exactly. Corinne?
Yeah, I'm not, some of the findings of fact, Chris, that you have, I think we don't know if they're, I don't have them in front of me, so forgive me, but if we talk about things not being sufficient, I don't know if we have enough data to be able to factually state that as a finding of fact. I think you talked about it doesn't make sufficient use of the transportation corridor. I mean, that's maybe true, but you know, I guess I would feel more comfortable if we were basing our findings of fact about why we're making this decision on our comprehensive plan and reference to the plan and our zoning ordinance, as opposed to the items of how the site would be used if we were to approve it.
Okay, if I could respond, I think other than your questioning 6, number 1 is that the community's vision for this area is retail, office, and entertainment. I think that was addressed by you quite a bit in the different things with the comp plan with the existing area. So I think that's a fact. I think it's a fact that our community's vision for that area is in that realm. Number 2, the proposed use is industrial. And I think by our zoning ordinance, that's a fact that the storage is an industrial use. I think we've all agreed with that. 3, it's been brought up that we can allow industrial uses in a CDD district, which we can. And that's why I said, well, the Plan Commission may be allowed to introduce some other uses into CDD zoning. We're not obligated to do so. So
I like that one.
Again, it goes back to the fact that we can allow ancillary uses in there if it serves the purpose of that CDD district, and if we think it enhances and complements other uses in that district. Which is why I go to 4. The size and the scope of the proposed use is likely to have an adverse effect on the adjacent uses. That really addresses all the public comment we've had, all the things we've talked about where this likely will not enhance the retail uses, the entertainment uses, the office uses next door. It's not going to, and I didn't say it won't, I said it will likely. And that's the decision we have to make. Will this likely generate an adverse effect for the adjacent uses? I believe it will.
Maybe we say it's not compatible, just because then it references back to the language of the plan.
Okay, I'll take that as a friendly amendment. That number 4, the size and the scope of the proposed use are not compatible with adjacent uses. How's that? Is that your friendly amendment?
That's my friendly amendment.
Okay. And then 5, that's a fact. The proposed use will not generate a significant number of jobs. And that goes back to our comp plan too. That this use does not, for such a major site in an area where we're looking for commercial, it does not generate those jobs. And you can argue 6, the proposed use does not make adequate use of the significant transportation infrastructure that's already in place. What I mean by that is we've invested a lot of money. We have a frontage road, a reverse frontage road. We've got major roads, major stoplights, all kinds of things leading here in anticipation of business that's bringing a lot of people, whether it's business, office, entertainment. I don't even want to get into that because I'd be happy with any of those uses, but it would be something that we feel is appropriate in our CDD district. And when we put in this use, we're generating by their admission maybe 10 cars a day. And we've built all this for nothing. Now, we built it for Shopko. We built it for the uses there. But the next use that comes along that needs that type of infrastructure, this won't be available. Whereas that use could go easily in the industrial park where it's designed with a single 2-lane road wrapping around the back. And it would be more than adequate for the transportation needs for that project. And that's why I put it in there. It does go back to what we've invested when this was originally our first TID in Monona, actually. This was our very first TID that we developed. And we put all that in to attract these larger users that had a lot of traffic coming and going off of the Beltline. Frankly, it has a massive amount of traffic. We wanted to be able to handle that and get it into that area and have adequate facilities to get in and out. That's why I put that in there.
Corinne, are you okay with him leaving it in there? Having now explained it, or would you still prefer it out? Are you suggesting a friendly amendment to take it out?
No, I think the thinking about it in terms of future, if someone else would want to come in and they would need that space, it would no longer be available. That's good explanation.
Any other friendly amendments from the commission members to Chris's motion? Okay. I have a motion on the, Doug, yes?
So one option is that I could draft these up for review by the Plan Commission if they so wish. At the next meeting, I could prepare these as discussed and sort of have them laid out if that's the will of the commission.
Okay. Do people feel like they need that this evening? Brian?
I don't. I agree with Chris. Like, I don't want to give kind of a false presumption to our applicants. Like, the information that we have here, like for me, as the proposal stands on its own of looking at the Shopko site and the Shopko site alone and the zoning permit, like I'm committed to kind of be able to give that feedback tonight and don't need a delay on that. If the applicant was coming back with a much larger proposal, it's a whole different proposal anyways.
Right.
And I think what I've heard from others on the commission is similar. Like, the single use in that location doesn't seem to be moving forward based on what I've heard.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? I believe I have a motion and I don't have a second yet.
Rob seconded it.
Thank you. I knew that my senior brain was failing me, so I appreciate that. Any other?
Susan has a question.
No, I was just going to reiterate that I feel like Chris laid it out very well. And I mean, if people need to see it printed, we could type it into the chat, but I don't feel a need. I think it's very clear. So
Okay.
I'm ready to vote tonight.
Ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor of the motion as written, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Greg, Joseph, Dan, I want to thank you for all the time and energy you put into this. And again, you know, great, obviously great project, wrong site. So we thank you, and I hope you can appreciate that we really do need to be attentive to our community, as well as the comprehensive plan. And we do our best to do that. And we thank you for the time, again, for the time and energy you put forward.
Thank you for your time, and we wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. That takes us to new business. And for new business this evening, we have a presentation by City Administrator Gatto and City Planner Plowman. Do we have a drum roll? Welcome, Brian. Thank you, Doug. This is, and I'm sure they're going to reference it, but this is something that was, you all undoubtedly remember at the end of November, beginning of December, we had a variety of discussions around what's, our role versus the CDA and kind of how things roll, if you will, around Monona. And as a result of that, the mayor and I had several discussions and with Brian and Doug as well, and I thought it would be helpful to for them to come in front of this committee to give us the lay of the land. So with that, I'll turn it over to Doug.
Thank you very much. So Brian and I have worked on this, and we'll just run through our slides, but we really see this as a great opportunity to continue that conversation. So we do have time at the end for Q&A, but we'll run through these. It shouldn't take too long. And hopefully it'll address some of the questions that you may have, and we can just take it away.
And just before we begin, Doug, Doug and I kind of envision this as kind of the start of a dialogue and a conversation. So it may be the case that there are things that we talk about tonight that might necessitate kind of a deeper dive into certain topics, and we're happy to do that kind of at a later basis. But we just want to, for tonight's purpose, just kind of give everyone, like Nancy said, kind of the lay of the land and just kind of development 101. And then as we need to dive in and have further conversations, we can actually do that.
Great. So just kind of an outline of what we're looking to cover here. Start off with just a very quick introduction. Then, what's in place and how that works in its current state. We'll give an overview of the city's TIF districts, as well as discuss the opportunity zone. Going to walk through how a project would progress through the process and sort of show how that would take place in the current framework. Talk about next steps, and then have time there for discussion as well.
So to kind of start the discussion for tonight, really what we want to focus on tonight is talking about development kind of holistically in Monona, and talk about what it is, why it's important, and who works on it, and what are the various roles. And to kind of start the discussion, is the idea of what is economic development? What do we mean when we use that term? And as you can expect, the definition of economic development varies widely depending on who you ask and what role you play in the process. But generally speaking, when we talk about economic development, we're talking about a process that encourages partners from the community, from the public sector, from the private sector, from the nonprofit sector, in some cases, to all collaboratively work together to better conditions for economic growth and employment, which ultimately then leads to improvements in quality of life for the particular location that you're talking about, whether it's a neighborhood, a community, municipality, a county, or kind of a larger region. And so economic development can be done in a number of different ways, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution to economic development. So the way that one community does economic development and the projects that they work on and the tools that they use may not be appropriate for another community, depending on the constraints and the opportunities that that particular community has. And so why do we work on economic development? Why is it important? Well, it's important because if we're able to create economic opportunities for the community, it kind of raises the boats for everyone. So adding additional houses, housing stock, a diversity of housing stock, adding more jobs, adding additional amenities, all of those things have, in many cases, the ability to increase the tax base for the community, which helps kind of reshift the burden on the taxpayers. But it also has the important aspect of kind of increasing the quality of life of the community. And that's one of the reasons why people locate their businesses or locate themselves to live in a community is because of high quality of life. And then you kind of start this self-enforcing circle. If you can increase the quality of life, you get more people to locate in a community, and you kind of feed that cycle. So that's why it's important, and that's why we work on it. So we'll talk about the different roles that various people in this process play. City staff members, people like Doug and myself. We are often the first point of contact for a developer or a broker or a banker that has a project. They come to us to ask questions, to kind of kick around ideas and kind of get a lay of the land for the community. What are the guiding documents? What is the community's vision? Those type of things. City council gets involved kind of on the back end of things. Once a project's pretty well down the road and may potentially have a project that's coming together with a financial component, they're involved in approving the final development agreement that goes with that. We have a number of city committees that are involved in different components of economic development, which we'll talk a little bit further, but Plan Commission obviously has a role in analyzing proposed uses from a land use standpoint and what fits appropriately or not in a community. The Community Development Authority is a separate committee that has a very defined and separate roles and responsibilities per state statute. They're really involved in kind of incentivizing developments kind of from the financial standpoint, putting land together, those type of things. And then there's an argument to be made that tourism also has an economic development component. So the city has a tourism commission that provides funding through room tax for different proposals and projects and ideas in the community, that with the goal of promoting Monona as a destination that would then draw people to choose to have lodging stays within the community. So those are all different kind of city-led initiatives that are involved. And then outside of the city, kind of externally, there's a number of different organizations that Monona partners with. Obviously we have MESBA, which functions as our Chamber of Commerce for this side of the community. We have the Monona Grove Businessmen's Association, which also kind of helps from an entrepreneur standpoint. We have the Madison Regional Economic Partnership, which is a collection of economic development professionals kind of across, not just Dane County, but kind of a 6-county wide area to talk about ways in which we can promote the Madison area as a region and kind of bring businesses and developments to the area to help all communities by keeping the quality of life in this area high. And then we have the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, which is a state organization. It's kind of a public-private partnership that gets involved in kind of helping site selectors find different locations in the state to do business and bring projects in development, and has some financial tools that they can bring to bear to incentivize certain developments. And then we have the Wisconsin Economic Development Association, which is kind of a professional organization that does a lot of lobbying on economic development legislation at the state capitol to kind of really help set the stage from a state policy standpoint to help communities like Monona and others across the state have the tools we need from a legislative standpoint to work on these projects. And then the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority is another state organization that's really involved in kind of the housing side of things, helping developers find tax credits for affordable housing and other housing projects as well. So those are just some of the different organizations that Doug or I and others have interaction with on a regular basis as we're kind of talking about the economic development process. And before we move on, I just want to give just a quick rundown of what does economic development mean for a municipality, and particularly a municipality of our size for Monona. So really, like I said, there's no one correct way to do it, but cities of our size really serve in a facilitation role. And so one way that you could be involved in economic development is you take the lead in acquiring property. And once you own the property, then you solicit for developers to come in and do the redevelopment project. And you sometimes, in many cases, provide a financial incentive for that developer or development group to come in and do the project, redevelop it, and then get it off the city's hands and onto the tax rolls. Another way that cities can be involved is to really be kind of the leader in establishing the infrastructure investments that a developer needs to make a project work. So that could mean remediating environmental issues that are on a site that might be challenging for a developer to overcome from a financial standpoint. It could be investing in putting in new infrastructure to make a project quote unquote shovel ready, ready to go for that next phase in development. And so that could be things like putting down new road, putting in water pipe, sewer pipe, storm sewer, those type of things that make the site function. And then also, obviously cities can be involved in providing some financial incentive to have or to help developments occur in situations where they might not otherwise occur, if not for that financial assistance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then lastly, kind of one of the more not as well understood roles for communities and economic development is this idea of building quality of life amenities that really make the community attractive for people to locate their business or themselves or their family to the community. So investing in things like libraries and parks and outdoor recreational facilities, all those type of things that are, you know, when people say, what do they look for in a community that they move to? Those are the type of things that they often tick off as saying, those are in the plus column for me when I make that decision. So cities can play a real role in providing those amenities, kind of having them there and using that as a means to help attract development in the community. So Doug, if you want to move on to the next slide. So again, looking at this from more of a high level analysis, kind of Doug and I kind of being relatively still outsiders to the community, having only been here for a couple of years. You know, when we look at the challenges and opportunities for Monona, there's a lot of great things for us to think about. You know, we are in very strong positions for a number of our TIF districts. You know, they're performing very well, that have put together really great projects that have changed the fabric of the community over the last number of decades. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those in a minute. And they're really dispersed over a geographic area, kind of focusing on our two major commercial corridors, kind of tapping into that. And as I just mentioned, the different ways of doing economic development for a municipality, we've used TIF districts to do all those different activities that I just mentioned in different ways, shapes, and forms. And that's really key. It's, you know, it's not just one activity. The city can be involved in a number of different economic development activities all at the same time. And then we have a very strong Chamber of Commerce with MESBA, and we're happy to be partners with them. And we have a good working relationship with them. They bring issues to the table that we should know about. We communicate with them, and we have a dialogue about, you know, taking a look at some of the things in our code that maybe would make sense to change to make things easier for people when they're going through our processes. So a good partnership is key, and I think we've got that in MESBA. And then, as I mentioned, you know, the quality of life amenities to promote. I think there's a lot that Monona has as assets to promote as to why somebody would want to locate here, you know, whether it's their business or their family. So we have a lot great things to kind of toot our horn about. That being said, there are some challenges that are that need to be overcome, and you know, we have overcome some of these challenges with some of the different projects that we've been involved in. But I think it's important for people to recognize that economic development is very much a long-term game. It's a, you know, a long-term strategy game that you have to, you know, pick your shots and make sure you're being very strategic and you're thinking about when you get involved in a project, and is it the best use for the community, and is it the best financial use for the community. So I think that's something just to keep in mind, that we want to make sure we're doing things for the right way, because the projects that we are involved in are projects that are going to be here for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So some of the challenges just from our perspective is, you know, we're a landlocked community, completely surrounded by other municipalities. So there's not really a way for Monona to grow horizontally. There's no land for us to really annex, be it greenfields or anything else to kind of, you know, move out there. So that's a challenge. And going along with that, you know, developers will tell you that there's a higher cost for development in communities that don't have greenfield space, because you're building on land that in many cases is already has infrastructure or buildings on it. So you're having to take down that existing structure or infrastructure and rebuild it up. And typically, you know, because there is no space to grow horizontally, you're looking to grow vertically. And so there are costs associated with that versus building in a, you know, farm field or prairie somewhere else, where you can just stick some pipes in the ground and some roads and you can get a development. You know, there's often environmental challenges that we see in infill development that you don't necessarily see in greenfield development. So, you know, that's why sometimes it seems like that projects come a little bit more slowly here. It's because there's more involved on the front end before a developer ever gets to a real viable project that they have to wrestle with. And then, at least in kind of some of our observations, there are some parcels in the community that are vacant or underutilized, but there seems to be limited interest in some of the owners of these parcels to move forward with redevelopment. And it could be for a variety of different reasons. You know, different ownership stakes in parcels, and they have to come to agreement amongst themselves about, you know, how they want to do development, if they want to do development. Some parcels function as cash flow for those property owners. So there may not be a financial incentive for them to go through the risk of doing a redevelopment. So it takes two parties really to have redevelopment in a community like Monona. It's the city being a willing participant and an advocate, but it also needs owners that are willing to kind of step up and say, I want to be part of this, or I want to bring in a partner who's going to help guide me from the private sector standpoint. So that's some of the challenge, at least we've seen as observations. And then, lastly, from a strengths and weakness standpoint, I think, our local economy is pretty well situated, but there aren't the type of kind of key nodes of economic activity like you'd see in other communities like Madison. Madison is not a good comparison for us for a host of reasons, but one of them is because of their size and scale, they're able to create kind of these nodes and networks of economic activity. They're all kind of similar. So you're talking about the biotech sector. They're able to capitalize on that type of redevelopment because they have multiple players that are in that field located in Madison in relatively defined geography. Monona doesn't necessarily have those type of parcels available where you can get that kind of condensed economic activity in one sector. So our economic development activity is really looking for parcels that are underutilized and working with developers to redevelop those into something that in many cases, has a mixed use component to it, or it's a completely different use than what's there previously. So those are just some of the challenges and opportunities. But did you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
No, I think that covered it pretty well. Yeah.
And we've talked about this before as a city council and as other community builders. Transit is also one of the challenges that Monona faces. We have limited transit service. Difficulty getting people connected from Monona to downtown Madison, and there are some substantial costs to getting those type of services in Monona. So that's something that's a challenge that we just need to wrestle with over time.
Great. So kind of transitioning here to the tools and the roles that each of the commissions and staff and the different bodies can play. So I'll just touch here on the role of the Plan Commission. I lifted here the text straight from the Wisconsin state statutes, but I think really to get more specific, I like this definition here that the Plan Commission works on a range of tasks related to community planning and land use development. So I think the specific there is the comp plan and then the plan implementation. But there's also here the elements of the public participation, the public hearings, the education that goes with that as well, the development review, the land use applications, the zoning permits, things like that. But then there's also the elements of the referrals and advisory roles that the Plan Commission can play, making recommendations to different bodies as well.
And the Community Development Authority has a separate set of responsibilities and rules, also under state statute, pretty specific roles and responsibilities. Really they're involved in what's called blight elimination. So properties that are underutilized or maybe an impediment to a community, they can be involved in assisting with the redevelopment of those properties. They are the entity under state statute that has the ability to borrow money to utilize for redevelopment. They can also own properties. And they can buy and sell and hold properties, which is something that the Plan Commission can't necessarily do. And really one of their key functions as it relates to economic development is being involved in the creation and maintenance of our TIF districts. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But one of the things that the CDA is charged with is when they've got a project that comes in front of the city looking for financial assistance for redevelopment, they're the body that has to do kind of the first line analysis of whether or not that particular development and the financial assistance request from the developer meets the quote unquote but for test under state statute, which if you boil it down means if the financial assistance that the developer is asking for does not occur, will this development occur on its own? So they're charged under state statute to do that type of analysis and determine whether or not it makes sense for the city to become involved financially in a redevelopment project. And because of this, they have a major role to play in kind of shaping the development agreements that they work with the city council and the developer on kind of the final details of the project. And we've seen that play out with a number of projects that the city's been involved in the last 10 or so years.
Then finally, the role of city staff. as Brian has already mentioned, kind of the first point of contact with developers. They'll often call us up, and it'll be sort of a two-pronged discussion. There'll be the question of the zoning, and the possibility of what could be built, but also at the same time, most likely if it's a redevelopment, if it's proximate to an existing TIF district, or if there's discussion of maybe some additional financial assistance. So we really kind of begin that conversation, try to sort of keep those conversations going. And once things, kind of begin to get onto the paper, that's when the different, committees and commissions will be brought in as well. So those, discussions do need to remain confidential. Just they're so early, there's often still purchase agreements that need to be made and things like that. So just from a competitiveness standpoint, they do need to keep that confidential. And typically, it is made public once the application is filed, once it maybe goes to CDA or to Plan Commission. That's when, the visuals will come out, the renderings, things like that, which gives a little bit more detail. I think finally here, both Brian and I, support and assist the city commissions and committees as well. So in these roles that both Plan Commission and CDA take, we both, help from a staffing point of view and act as the bridge between those two as well. So just here on the next couple of slides, we just call out the membership of each of both the Plan Commission and the CDA. So here obviously this doesn't need much explaining, but just for anyone that's following along, 2 alders. You also have myself as the staff member, with the rest being citizen members and the mayor being ex officio as well.
Have I been fired?
You know what? That's on me. I created this slide, and I think I had.
I've been relieved.
You're done. Yeah,
Finally
you're
out of bondage after all these years.
That's my mistake. When I made the slide, I had started.
You could have given me a call first, but this is okay.
Yeah, you just log off right now. You're good.
All right, I'll sign off.
It was a test, Chris, to make sure you're paying attention. So you got it.
And then here we have the membership of the Community Development Authority. Again, 2 members from the City Council and 5 citizen members, and then staff, Doug and myself. And then we do have a contract consultant who does some of our financial analysis for TIF districts, Barry Becker, who has been with us for a while now.
So now we'll kind of begin to talk about, some of the guiding documents, and quite a few of these have been in discussion in just the last few weeks here. But it's already been mentioned, there's a number of tools and plans at the commission, particularly the Plan Commission's disposal. So the first one here is the city ordinance. I'd say that's the primary tool. The zoning ordinance specifically. Moving through, you have the comp plan, the 2016 comp plan. It's really seen as kind of a vision, a 10-year vision for the city. State statute does require that be updated at minimum every 10 years. So it is seen. The comp plan itself is listed as 2016 through 36. So it's kind of a 20-year vision, but it is updated every 10 years at minimum. It's seen as a guiding document. It includes those future land use maps, and it is specifically referenced in the ordinance as well. Moving on, you have the corridor plans. So these specifically guide redevelopment and design standards for a particular geographic district. So it's not a development plan, but it's more of a geographically focused design guideline or something like that. So, notable ones that we have here in the city, the Broadway corridor plan, but also the Monona Drive urban design guidelines. So things that would be used in conjunction with any sort of development review, particularly, thinking of Monona Drive, the specifics there about, there's language in there about, architectural style, but also building orientation, parking, things like that. So really to sort of help with some of that uniformity, and it is, you'll see, if we do get an application for a development along Monona Drive, for example, that is specifically referenced. And just gives the Plan Commission a way to evaluate any proposed project. Moving through here, and another one is the Strategic Plan for Economic Development. This is a 2006 document. It was created by an advisory committee that was temporary. It was advisory to the Plan Commission and created a 10 to 15-year plan. So it's sort of reached the end of its useful life, but there is, opportunity. It is a standing, committee as needed. So it is there from 2006. The next one is the Strategic Housing Plan, 2007. That one is dated, is adopted to guide public decisions and investments, specifically in housing. So very topic focused and specific there. And then lastly here we have the redevelopment district project plans. And so these are very much attached to the TIDs, to the TIFs that take place. So you'll see the one in the image here is for TIF 9. And so that's for the Riverfront project. It's very specific about, it even gets into some of the infrastructure and some of the specific improvements that would be associated with those projects.
So then we'll talk a little bit about the tools that we have on the CDA side of things. So really in Wisconsin, the main tool that municipalities have to be involved in economic development is tax increment finance. And so that's really a tool that helps communities incentivize redevelopment through a number of different ways. So cities can incentivize redevelopment through using TIFs to fund infrastructure improvements. So like we talked about before, putting in roads and the streets and the sewer pipes and all that kind of under the ground, not flashy stuff that really makes a project go. Cities can use TIF districts to help put together that infrastructure that makes a project more viable for a developer to move forward. But TIFs can also be used to provide developer incentives to help somebody make a project go that might not otherwise go because of just the way that the market is, or something unique about that particular project or location that would make the project not happen otherwise. So what I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking about TIF in basics. And so what you see here is this image, which kind of shows a breakdown of a TIF district. And a couple things I want you to take away from this, this diagram. So on the bottom, in this kind of lighter blue, what you see here is called the existing tax base. So that is any piece of property in town, even a commercial property that's in a TIF district, they pay a certain amount of property tax based on the valuation of that property prior to it being in the TIF district. So at the beginning part of this chart, you see kind of before the red line, all commercial properties paid whatever their assessed value is in property taxes. Once we create a TIF district, that same parcel that's in a TIF district continues to pay property tax. And that initial amount that happened before the red line, that same amount of taxes goes to our 4 tax jurisdictions. So the city of Monona, the Madison College, Dane County, and the Monona Grove School District. They all continue to receive the same amount of taxes that they received from that particular parcel prior to it being put in a TIF district. Then any increment or any additional property tax growth that occurs from that parcel or parcels that are in a particular TIF district, that's in the dark blue, that growth in property tax is captured by the municipality and the municipality only. And that growth is used to fund, pay down the debt or fund other improvements that are planned for in the district. And the different things that a community can pay for through a TIF district really depends on what the community decides. And it's pretty flexible under state statute and under the Department of Revenue's guidelines. But in establishing a TIF district, the community has to adopt what's called a project plan. And that project plan has to spell out the proposed uses of the TIF increment money and their best estimate at what the cost of those different project items would be. And so that those project eligible costs is what it's called. Those eligible costs that are defined by the community could be things like infrastructure improvements, like we've talked about, like streets, sewers, trails, parks. It could pay for land acquisition. It can pay for site development costs. So some of the soft costs that are involved in getting a project ready to go. Professional services related to a TIF project. So architectural fees, survey costs, those type of things. But then they can also be used for development incentives. So things like a cash grant to a developer or a forgivable loan or direct loans or land write-downs or loan guarantees are all things that could potentially be an eligible cost in a TIF district if that's the way that the community has set up the project plan. TIF districts typically, depending on the type of TIF district it is, have a maximum life of 27 years. So when you create the TIF district, it can remain open for 27 years with a couple of caveats that we'll get into in a moment. You can close the TIF district early, so you don't have to keep it open for 27 years, but you have to have enough increment in the district that's generated to pay off any of your project items that you've got in your plan or any debt that's associated with that. And once all that's paid off, communities have the option of closing the TIF district early, or they can leave it open to get to the end of the 27 years. And if there's excess increment in one district, they could petition the Department of Revenue to create what's called a donor district, meaning a TIF district that's in the black could donate some excess increment to another TIF district that might not be functioning as predicted to kind of help the other district out. Once we get to the end of the life of that TIF district, the 27 years, we can close the TIF district. And at the time that we close the TIF district, all 4 taxing jurisdictions get the benefit of that parcel that's now at a higher value than it was when we started 27 years prior. So, just real ballpark example, if a property was, worth $10,000 when we started the TIF district and you close the TIF district 27 years later, now it's worth $100,000. All 4 taxing jurisdictions get the benefit of that increased value, and they'll see more tax revenue from that parcel or that geographic area once the TIF district is closed. So that's really the tool. We're using the future growth in tax value of that parcel or parcels in an area to subsidize, to pay for the investments, to raise up the taxable value of those parcels once the district is no longer in existence. So that's kind of a quick and dirty on TIF financing. In terms of the city, like we've talked about, we have a number of TIF districts that are open. There's a number of different ways that cities can finance some of the improvements in TIF districts. One of the more common ways to do it is that the city takes on general obligation debt to pay for the infrastructure or the items in the TIF district, and then pays back that debt with the increased increment that they see in those districts. So in the case of Monona, we have of the city's debt, the overall debt that's general obligation debt, we have about $23.5 million of that is TIF-related debt, or about 46% of our debt is related to TIF-related projects or investments. And again, that's stuff that's repaid back by the increased value of the TIF districts that we have. And really the rationale behind why municipalities should consider using TIF districts is that, in making a public investment to promote private development, you have the effect of, in many cases, creating additional jobs and having tax-based growth that would otherwise not occur if you didn't have the tax increment financing district. So that's one of the reasons why municipalities use it as a way to help incentivize development that, for a variety of reasons, might otherwise not occur. And then just for the city as a whole, just kind of give you a sense of where we stand. So municipalities in Wisconsin are allowed to have no more than 12% of their equalized value of property value in a TIF district. Right now, with our districts that are open, we have 9% of our value. So we have about 3% that's left, and that equates to about $43 million worth of additional capacity for TIF. And one of the organizations that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Wisconsin Economic Development Association, they're kind of a lobbying arm. They have been working with a number of partners over the last couple of years to try to get the state legislature to consider increasing that cap on TIF capacity, to raise it up from 12% to higher, because they recognize that TIF is really one of the only tools that municipalities have in their toolbox to incentivize development. We've had a lot of good conversations and brought a lot of people from across the aisle on as co-sponsors, but as one would expect with the way things were in the legislature the last couple of years, it's kind of gotten lost in the gridlock of things. So it's not gotten up to the floor for full votes by the bodies, but it's an item that we continue to press our local legislators and legislators across the state to consider, because it's really an important tool. And if Monona is in a pretty good spot, but there are other municipalities, particularly those in rural communities, where they're at the max because of just the size of their tax base is so much smaller than ours. you have one TIF district and you're at your 12% and that's it. So you can't, create a second district to incentivize another development somewhere else. So that's one thing that I work on. So I'm a board member of WIDA. So I work with a bunch of people on these type of legislative proposals to let them know what the on the ground experience is of municipalities and what are some of the tools and policies we need from a state perspective to help incentivize economic development. So that's something that we work on kind of on a staff level.
I think the next couple of slides, we just wanted to call out a few of the projects, a few of the TIDs that have been successful in more recent memory. Just highlight, I won't sort of run through these too specifically, but some of the numbers that have happened. You've got TID 6, which includes both the Merida and UW health clinics over on sort of the east side of Monona. TID number 8 was the Yahara Commons, formerly Tracer. So over 120 residential units, significant ground floor retail there as well. And it also included improvements to Lotus Park. So as Brian said, some of the improvements that sort of take place with these TIDs, that was visible there with those park improvements.
So I was just going to say, Corinne, how long have you lived in Monona?
14 years.
Okay, because I was going to say for those people that haven't lived in Monona quite as long, where Tracer is now, Yahara Terrace, that was a trailer park. And a very blighted area, and the other areas we're talking about here too are also, but I just that I mentioned again, these are traditionally usually more blighted areas that need this extra boost in order to get the development done.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally at TID 9, the most recent that was really the Riverfront project. Got 2 market rate apartment buildings as well as the Abbott Hotel, nearly 100 rooms there. You've got the commercial space as well as Grand Crossing Park. So again, a great design there that includes public infrastructure improvements. I know the project cost there was land remediation, but there was also the roads, the sort of city street infrastructure that went in. So a lot of things included within that created that project. And then, just something I did want to touch on here as well is the Renew Monona Loan Program. This is something upon the closure of a TIF district, you are allowed for another 12 months, you are allowed to spend down some of those extra funds as long as they're used for with the purpose, one of them being affordable housing, as sort of the provision for affordable housing. So the city has established, and this has been going for a while, but it was recently refunded within the last probably 18 months, the Renew Monona Loan Program. So that includes improvements for it's a low interest loan program for qualified individuals, and it includes assistance with down payments for a first time home buyer, but also a recent addition was the energy improvement efficiency or energy efficient improvements, including things like solar panels. So we have had a couple projects come through that have managed to fund or finance solar projects, as well as major home rehab. So we've seen people, adding additional bedrooms, living space to properties, being able to use this TIF funding. So, it does finance a lot of large projects, but it can also be used at much more of a local, smaller scale to help assist with some of the goals, specifically from the housing plan, for example, that was referenced earlier.
And this is one of the roles of the CDA, is to be the first body that reviews these applications for Renew Monona loan assistance. So they meet with the applicant and kind of talk through the project, and if they think it meets the guidelines, they in many cases would approve the loan, and then we as staff work with that property owner to get them the funding and those loans are repaid back on an annual basis. So we then monitor the project on the back end of things.
So here we have just a map. It's not the clearest, but it shows the geographical span of the different districts that are in the city. and as Brian mentioned, it's east-west, north-south as well. It does cover really the main commercial corridors, both east and west Broadway, as well as up and along Monona Drive. So you'll see some overlap there, but really I think this map always signifies to me kind of the geographic dispersion of these districts all across the city.
So then another relatively new resource or tool, and you heard it referenced earlier this evening, is this idea of opportunity zones. This was something that came in federal law in 2017 under the tax reform law, really providing an opportunity for people to reinvest some of their capital tax gains in underutilized areas and in census tracts that meet their definition of kind of being, I don't know if it's exactly in the poverty range, but kind of close to that. And the idea behind this program is that they have these people park their capital gains in these areas. They can defer those liabilities for, I believe it's up to 7 years. So kind of a way to help somebody, but while getting capital into an area that might not otherwise get capital invested in it. I'll be frank, this has been kind of a challenging program. The city of Monona is part of one opportunity zone. So it's to see on the map, but just everything kind of south of Broadway from kind of the waterfront running west, and then also including the industrial area, industrial park are included in what's called Madison Opportunity Zone number 2. And so we are, in a partner in that district with the town of Madison, part of Fitchburg, the city of Madison, including parts of Southtown or South Park Street, the Alliant Energy Center, and some other areas in this Opportunity Zone number 2. I think the challenge is it's a really good project in theory, but the rules and the way in which it was rolled out have been kind of confusing. So there has not been a lot of individuals, at least in the Madison market, that have really taken this as an investment opportunity. We partner with the city of Madison and our other neighboring municipalities to kind of get the word out about this opportunity zone in the marketing and promotion standpoint. And I've talked with our colleagues for the city of Madison, and there has not been a lot of interest from potential developers or folks with capital gains to invest in opportunity zone number 2 or number 3, which covers another part of the metro area. There has been, I believe, one project on East Washington, which is in their opportunity zone number 1, that has seen some investment with this program. But it's been challenging, and I don't think COVID has done anyone any favors with this program, and kind of a weird sunset time limit for this program. I think the last year that the benefit window was open is 2027. So it kind of didn't give people a lot of time to understand it and make use of it before the value started to decrease for people. However, in 2019, pre-pandemic, the city of Monona was involved in a effort to get some prior White House staff that was involved in the Opportunity Zone program to come to the Madison metro area and do a tour of all 3 opportunity zones, including our portion of Opportunity Zone number 2. So bringing them by the Broadway corridor and showing them everything that had been invested outside of the corridor, outside of the Opportunity Zone, but also the opportunities that do exist in Southtown and some of the other areas. So we as staff have been involved, and to the best of our abilities with this program to let people know what Monona has to offer, but also what the program has to offer regionally.
I was actually just going to chime in here too, because it relates. You just said that you just talked about the long term again, and I just as a data point, when we talk about all this development being so long term, if I remember correctly, Tom Stolper said that they started working on the riverfront in 2008, and as you know, we're still under construction there. We're not done. So it's all of these projects are just, take a lot longer than one might imagine, and that could be frustrating sometimes, but it's reality.
So I'm just going to run through kind of the process here for an existing project. Some of the pieces that we have in place that can assist potential developers, and a few of these will look familiar. And as also sort of walk through a hypothetical project, how it would progress through the city as well as through the Plan Commission and CDA. So here, the Policy and Procedures Manual, you'll have seen this. It was updated in May 2020. A lot of help from Elisa getting this pulled together and looking as good and uniform as it does. So thank you to her. And really in here, it includes a lot of details on different applications. The intention here was that it be beneficial from everyone, from large-scale developers all the way through to someone looking to put an addition on their house, on their residential home. And I do know, I get calls from developers that have used this, have looked at it, they're familiar with the process with the zoning permit, for example. There's suggested timelines on here, the different bodies they need to go through, as well as even a link to the application forms themselves. So this is just one example of how we, instead of just directing people maybe to the ordinance, we have a much better document that can really take people through the process visually. The flow charts really help with that and explain it to them. Additionally, educational materials for Tiff projects are also underway, again with the same branding, the same theme. Really, as we think about marketing materials and materials in that ilk, I think these are really helpful with that.
I think Doug brings up a really important point that I just want to make sure that I emphasize so people understand it. I've been involved in economic development for almost 15 years now. And one thing I've consistently heard from developers that I've talked to across communities, across states, is that one of the number one things they want to see from a municipality, and one of the things that helps them decide whether or not to do a project in one community or another, among other things, is the ease in which they can get information on what the process is. So knowledge for them is valuable. It's worth time and money to them. So the more information they can get on the front end to understand, what are the different steps in the process? What are the things that staff is going to ask from them? What are the things that the Plan Commission and City Council or CDA, whoever the players are in the process, the more they can understand, what the process is and how consistently a community applies, their rules in that process. That's valuable to them. And so that's one of the things that Lisa and Doug have been working on over the last couple of months, is a way in which to clarify for the layperson, whether it be somebody who's a property owner in the community and hasn't really done development before, or a seasoned development professional, providing all this information to them in an easy to understand manner, so that they understand that our process is pretty well streamlined given our community size. And I think that's valuable. And that's a service that we try to provide, is to let developers know on the front end, here's what they can expect. We will never guarantee for them what an answer from the Plan Commission or the City Council is going to be on a particular project. That's your role in analyzing whether or not you think that particular proposal meets our various criteria and is a good fit for the community. But we can do the best job we can on our end to let them know what to expect, so they can make decisions with their resources.
Absolutely. And so here, just have a sort of example application process. And I think we've touched on a lot of these points, but this is just an example that every project is different, but just kind of working through the process. As we mentioned, city staff would be the first point of contact. So there'll be the initial contact. A developer's interested in some sort of new project they have in mind. They will first off ask things like the zoning, and oftentimes it'll be a CDD zoning or something like that. But you'll direct them both to the zoning ordinance, but also the comp plan. Kind of walk them through those things. Also the policy and procedures manual, so they know exactly what to expect each step of the way. It's at that point that they may be talking that they've already got an idea in mind of maybe how many units they're thinking, if it's apartments, how many stories, things like that. Just very, very high level ideas. Typically, there will be a TIF ask if it's if it's a redevelopment, if it's in a district or it's close, or there's some challenges with the site. There'll typically be some sort of financial ask from the city. And so one of the things that the city will be looking from the applicant pretty early on is what order of magnitude are you thinking of here? that's when they'll at least have a pro forma in place with a ballpark figure that can be discussed. And that will be when it moves through to the informal TIF discussion. So is it, even in the realm of possibility for that to take place? And that's really one of the first steps that we try and get a developer to is to have that conceptual discussion. Is it, permitted by zoning? Is it close enough that it's a CDD type discussion, that it's a permitted use in some way? Moving through, it would then go, there'd be the TIF discussion at the CDA. This is when it begins to run on parallel tracks, I would say, between both the CDA and the Plan Commission. A project needs to be both viable from the CDA's point of view. So, from a TIF district, from the more of the financial side, as we've laid out the different roles here between both the CDA and the Plan Commission. Concurrently, we do want to be trying to get them in front of the Plan Commission for a pre-hearing as well. So at that point, the conceptual massings, the number of stories, number of units, things like that would be discussed. Additionally, things like parking would come up maybe, underground parking in particular. That may be one of the costs that could be associated with a TIF ask. And so those types of things will begin to run parallel. This is really an oversimplified diagram. Moving through, there would then be kind of the more formal TIF request once things are beginning to take shape. Maybe revisions have been made. And again, that would be the CDA, but then there'd also be the Plan Commission formal hearing. And then we'd be moving through towards the TIF approval. So there would be the financial viability and those that research that's done by Gary Becker and the CDA, with that decision. But concurrently, it would be moving through for final consideration at the Plan Commission. So that's really where staff can help with scheduling and liaising between the two, and working with the chairs of both, in order to keep things on a similar track, make sure that everyone's on the same page, and to be able to work the project through, so that it's successful, and viable in both the eyes of the CDA and the Plan Commission.
Can I ask a question about TIF? Is it possible to do anything with TIF with an area like the Shopko part of Southtown, even though that was a TID district that's now closed? I mean, given that we have some room, the city has some room. Is that ever done? Reopen one or recreate one? Or
yeah, I mean, you would have to create, the community would have to create a new redevelopment area and an associated TIF district for, however you would define that area. Yeah, that's what would need to happen.
But I guess what I would also add to that is that it's, if we were creating a new district, which in that case we would, I believe, Brian, we generally would not create a new district in a vacuum. Like, it's not as simple as putting a big circle around an area we want to develop. We actually wouldn't do it without a large or player that is indicating to us that they want to be part of that district.
Yeah, I mean, timing is very much key here, because again, you're capped on the number of years that the TIF district can be open. You're also capped on the number of years that you can have expenditures associated with the TIF district. So you don't want to start that clock running, if you will, by creating a TIF district in an area until you know that you've got a pretty well vetted, at least initial project kind of waiting in the wings that would help catalyze the redevelopment of a larger area. So I think you just got to be mindful of the timing so that you don't start it too soon and you're waiting for a number of years for a project to go through the process, like Nancy mentioned, with challenges with environmental remediation and ownership issues and those type of things. If you burn too much time on the TIF clock, then it becomes more difficult to get that district to perform the way you want it to. So you got to be mindful of the timing when you create a new district.
Sure, that makes sense.
I guess one other question about that too. What if you go back to that, the first box is initial contact with city. So is it typically, I guess, do we do any proactive looking for businesses or looking for opportunities, or is that something you do with the more regional groups that you're coordinating with?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. We do work with our regional groups to kind of let them know what's out there and what the community is interested in. We do, Doug and I have conversations with brokers on a pretty, regular basis, whether it's a topic that they're cooking up or if they say, we've got this parcel that's, we've taken on a client for, what are some options available. So it's a mix of both. I will say, it's a little challenging to be super proactive because that, like I said, again, you need to have property owners that are really, really interested in doing the redevelopment. And we haven't necessarily, at least in the last couple of years, seen a lot of that along some of the corridor areas for a number of different reasons. We have lots of conversations with potential developers and brokers. The challenge is a lot of those projects have yet to come to fruition for a number of reasons. They can't get their financing together, or they don't have the kind of partnership agreement worked out the way they want to. Somebody wants to buy a parcel from somebody else. They can't come to terms on purchase of that property. So we have a lot of conversations that are not at the stage in which there's a project that's publicly ready to be reviewed by the Plan Commission or by the CDA, which I can understand the frustration with that. But it's our job, Doug and mine and others, to provide support for those potential developers or property owners as they're thinking through their projects. And once they've got something that's ready to go and they file, that application, whether it's for a zoning permit or for, a TIF assistance request for CDA, then we're happy to have communication with the CDA or the Plan Commission or the City Council on what's going on. It's just because a lot of those projects aren't to the stage in which they're ready to make, formal ask. We can't disclose that information publicly.
Yeah, and I think we actually touched on a couple of these points already, but again, just to stress that each project is different. There's the project zoning to take into account, the creation of a new or an addition to an existing TIF district. These things are all important to take into account. And as I said, if there was a rezoning involved or something like that, that timeline and that sort of process would shuffle, would certainly change. Again, the coordination here between both the CDA and the Plan Commission is vital to make sure that everyone's on the same page. The different things that are being reviewed, that the whole project remains viable for both groups, as well as obviously for the potential developer. And again, just to stress here the importance of that confidentiality and confidence for the developer. Oftentimes, when they're speaking with staff, it's still the deal hasn't been finalized or something like that. So there's still a negotiation element that needs to take place, and were that that news to get too far, then it could compromise that position. So those are some of the reasons why the confidentiality and why we can't maybe share as much information as broadly as possible until it's filed and in the public domain.
So kind of going back to some of the earlier questions about what are the roles we can all play? I think there are some definite next steps that we as staff are involved in, and think that there's a role for others to play in as well. We talked a lot about quality of life and kind of building the brand, promoting Monona as a place where people want to be. So the city right now, a number of different staff members are involved in kind of taking a look at our communications and the way in which we reach out to people. And so I know we've had some conversations as a Plan Commission about what type of information we're able to share about projects that are in the hopper, if you will. So I think, Doug and I are thinking about ways in which we can provide you all with that information and others in the community with that information once it's available to be shared. So there's some different channels we're thinking about there. Some of the community media staff has taken some great drone footage of the community for some other projects, and there's a way in which we can shape some of that material to be kind of a promotional material for kind of the brand of Monona, if you will, and kind of help us, put that in front of site selectors when they're doing kind of a regional search of, potential opportunities in the Madison metro region, kind of highlighting, here are the things that are unique about Monona that might be enticing somebody that's looking for land to develop. So that's definitely something that we're involved in and think there's a role for the city there. And then lastly, we didn't really touch too much on this, but a lot of the economic development that we've been talking about is kind of bringing in the new project or the redevelopment. And that's really important for a community. But there's also something to be said for looking at what the community has as existing investments in its business community. And how do we as a community help them stay in the community, expand their operations in the community. I think that the literature in economic development typically says that 80% of net new job growth actually comes from existing small or smaller medium-sized business development in the community, not necessarily from a large project that comes in and drops 100 or 200 jobs in the community, but it's those smaller to medium-sized existing businesses in the community that are able to grow their operation, hire more people, or move from a smaller space to a larger space. I think there's something to be said for that, particularly for a community of our size. And there's definitely a role that we envision MESBA playing with that. Devin and I have talked about bringing MESBA together to kind of do a listening session with, kind of as a learning opportunity for the city, so we can learn, how the city can be a partner to help business attraction and retention. So that's something that we're kind of getting around how to frame that conversation. As I said, COVID's kind of throwing us all for a loop, and I think there is something lost doing some of these meetings over Zoom, particularly where you're wanting to have kind of a confidential discussion with an existing business owner about what are some of the challenges and opportunities that they see both for their personal business, but also kind of their view of the community as a whole. So it's an important conversation that needs to happen, but it needs to be done in the right way so that we get the value from those interactions, because we don't want to waste the business owner's time. We want their feedback, but we want to do it in the right way. So that's something we're talking with MESBA about how we can flesh that out. And then, as Doug mentioned, figuring out ways in which we can report more information to the Planning Commission and other policy groups in the city about what's going on, with the caveat that there are things that we can't share yet until they get to a public standpoint.
Great. Great. Thank you, you guys.
Thank you. So I'm going to stop the screen share so we can get everyone back on the same. I think you all have have our emails, so I'll stop that and we'll come back to it. There we go.
Helpful? Chris.
Question, and I don't know, I see the CDA chair is on too. Maybe it's more for him, Brian, I don't know, but we're showing right now that we're up to 9% of our equalized value with our TID districts, and we're allowed up to 12. Is that a as of date value? In other words, down at Riverfront, for example, we've got another 20 million or more that's going to come on. So if that comes on in the next year or two, does that take our 40-some million down to 20-some million that we have available for opening new TIDs?
It has phase 1 and phase 2 in there. It does not have phase 3 yet, so that would have to be added in.
That's a 20-some million project, so that'll cut what we have available in half if we don't create a district before that comes on. And how many districts do we have right now in total that are open?
They're open. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are all open.
Okay, and are any of those looking like they're going to close soon? Or are they all going to be open for a while? I understand that we'll use them for contributing TIDs even if they hit their repayment, but is there anything scheduled that like this one's going to have to close, period?
Yeah, the majority of them are open into at least 26 or longer, depending on if we want to have, how long we want to have some of them as donor districts.
Okay.
7 is a possibility to close in the next couple of years, but all the other ones are open at least until 26.
So I guess what I'm getting at, I don't know if there's areas that the council, the mayor, and the CDA all agree on. This is an area we need to target, and I'm just trying to look at if it does us any good to target a little earlier. But if we've got some districts that we could close, then we can recreate some equalized value by closing them if they're just donor districts right now, correct?
Sure, but if they're not donor districts, then that means the districts that are underperforming would be open.
What I'm worried about is with Riverfront, we have a major increment coming online, and that's going to significantly reduce our ability to do future TIDs. unless we capture it before it comes online. Because if we capture it now, it's equalized values of now. We don't lose it. We can create a district, and we can eventually be over that 12% equalized as long as we're not trying to create a new district. The value can go up. It's just we can only create up to the 12%. Correct? Okay. So, and it might be a discussion, and I don't know if Plan Commission has any interest in being involved in a discussion if we see an area that really we feel should get the eye of the council and the CDA. That might be something you want to talk about some night.
Sure. I think that it's safe to say that the same areas I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that the same areas that the council would be interested is probably the same areas that the CDA and the Plan Commission would be. I mean, I think we all but I'm absolutely happy to have that conversation.
I'm just,
yeah.
As you can tell, I'm nervous about our ability to create new districts being seriously cut down after the phase 3 comes on. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember, Brian, but it's 20 some million. It's like 25, give or take, million on that increment on that thing, is it not?
About 22, give or take.
22 guaranteed, but I think the project value it's a minimum. It's a guarantee of 22. It could be higher once it's done.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And I think it was great. I think it's very informative to always have a presentation of how these things work, why we do them, and where we're at, and why we don't know about them until they're well down the road. Because if we were, then Stolper wouldn't be able to negotiate in private with them and try to attract somebody.
Devin, would you like to chime in as MESBA?
I would love to, Nancy. Thank you. I was just going to ask if I was allowed. But first, let me thank Doug and Brian for putting this together. It was definitely very informative. Generally, my knowledge of city finances, you could summarize it on a Post-it note, and you'd probably have room to spare. So this was really interesting to learn about. I did have kind of one question, though, regarding, and maybe this is apples to mailboxes kind of comparison, but with the purchase of the San Damiano site, there are a few other properties in Monona that, are either vacant or underdeveloped. The White Horse property, the property right next to Food Fight, a few others. Does the purchase of the San Damiano and the kind of the size and scope of that, does that put any other purchases from the city, on ice indefinitely, or is that something where they've sort of planned accordingly?
No, I mean, planned accordingly with that. I mean, again, the debt, GO debt that we get from tax increment finances back from increments from the various districts. So it's all part of one general debt for the city, but they're kind of different pockets within that. I think that the bigger challenge is what Chris had mentioned about the capacity to create new TIF districts and the value that we can capture. For me, that's the larger concern that we need to address. The purchase of San Damiano is separate and not related to that we've incurred for our various TIF districts. So they're kind of,
sure,
like I said, apples in mailboxes type stuff.
And, and in fact, I think it's safe to say, without speaking out of turn, there are kind of, 2 or 3 different things that are sort of churning right now. And the reality, behind the scenes, and the reality is that we couldn't do them all because we don't have the TID room, and again, they're churning. I'm not saying there's anything definite. I'm not saying that there's anything even close to, because it's a long-term thing, but I'm just saying that, there's no way we could take on 3 different TID districts. We have, as Chris just pointed out, we all just pointed out, there's a limited amount of room that we have. Yeah, Mary, you're on mute.
Yeah, and if I could also say there's a limited amount of room in terms of what we can do for TID, but there's also limits to what our staff can do.
Right.
We have a very small planning department, and frankly, Sunny Kriesel, who was our previous planner before Doug, I mean, she spent 24/7 on the riverfront for about 6 years. It's very, very involved and takes a lot of time. So we also have to take into account our staff capacity for some of these things too. But yeah, we always have probably more like 6 or 7 potential projects that Brian and I meet every couple of weeks, and I always go through the list. Have you heard from them? Have you heard from them? Oh, a little bit, I mean, some of them have been on the list for years, and then we'll hear from them once, and then 6 months later, we might hear another call. It just, these things all have their own timeline. And so, but great job, guys. You really did a nice basic explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, thumbs up. So Corinne, yeah.
Beyond talking about the financing of it, I guess I was, we were looking at the plan tonight, the ordinances, and we also were looking at that Broadway corridor plan, which I guess it was just making me wonder. I know there's staffing considerations with this as well as financial, but is there a need for us to be looking at our plans that like the Broadway corridor plan? Is there a process to retire that and do something different? Or is there a need to look at our CDD and think about whether we need to tighten that up a little bit, or, make another zoning district? I don't know. But just, is there, like you mentioned, I think Chris, you mentioned there's CDD all throughout the city, and maybe it would make sense to have different categories, or, I don't know.
I'll let other people speak to that, but I want to go back to something that Chris said 2 months ago when this first came up, which is, the good news is something like CDD gives us flexibility, right? Which is something that's really helpful, because we are kind of a challenged community in terms of having a particular brand, if you will, like a tech corridor or something like that. So it provides some flexibility that's important. The flip side of that is it provides some flexibility. And from a development standpoint too, that makes threading the needle, as and tonight was an example of that. That makes it more challenging, because it makes the decisions tougher. It's not so hard-edged and so specific that it's an easy up or down. It's but I'll let the experts beyond that jump in on the value of the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think there's a role for the Plan Commission to play, particularly on the zoning side of things. So, your question about the mechanics of the CDD district, the way it's written, and does it function the way that the Plan Commission and City Council envision it to function? And if not, then what are the things that need to change about that district, or changing the zoning of that geographical area to something different to better match, what you envision that area being. So yeah, I think there's a role to be played there in terms of, taking a look at some of our more frequently used codes to see if they make sense, or if they need to be changed or rezoned to something different. I think that's a good use of time. The corridor plan topic, and you ask any planner, you get a couple different responses to how they feel about corridor plans. I think they have a role in providing kind of a high level view of what an area wants to be, and what the community wants the area to be. But what I struggle with corridor plans is we can develop the best pre-pictures of what we envision an area to be, but if there isn't a developer or developers that are willing to invest money in making that vision happen, then we've just spent money creating really great pictures that may never come to fruition. And we've set expectations in a way that might not be realized. So I struggle with that. At the same time, I hear what you're saying about having an outdated corridor plan. Just something to know about that. To do a corridor plan right, you typically have to spend at least a year kind of going through a public engagement process to get the type of feedback that's valuable to create something that's meaningful for the participants in 12 to 18 months. And there is a cost to that. You're looking at probably north of $20,000, even with internal staff help and a consultant working on it. So it's an undertaking to not be taken on lightly. It's something that should be planned for, probably in parallel with some other activities related to that particular corridor, whether it's a redevelopment plan or a TIF district that's being contemplated, that would make sense to do them in parallel. As a standalone, I wonder about the value that you get from just doing a plan, because the plan isn't necessarily prescriptive saying that a developer has to build X type of development. I mean, you can say what type of uses are allowed or what type of uses are prohibited, but you can't say I want Sammy's sandwich shop, but not Jimmy's sandwich shop. Like, you can't get down to that level of detail and say I want this and not that. I mean, there has to be some flexibility in terms of the type of uses that you're going to allow in that area, but you can't get down to the granular and say, well, I only want at home or something like that to go in the space. We can't get down to that level of specificity. We can only say we want these types of mixture of uses and the site to be laid out in this particular manner. Those are the type of things that we can put in a plan, but it can't get down to the level of saying it shall be only this. So I'm not saying no, we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying it should not be done without giving it a lot of thought.
Rob?
Just going back to what Corinne had said, is specifically the Broadway corridor plan, is it outdated? How old is it? It's 30 years old.
80s, yeah.
Like, is it something to consider retiring and just have the CDD zones analyzed and look at any zoning applications under those guidelines instead of the Broadway? I'm not super familiar with the Broadway corridor plan. I haven't read it, but I know it's 30 years old, and Monona was a different place then.
Yeah, we did. I mean, there's a reason why we relied on the comprehensive plan, for instance, for this application. And I would say for the most part, we've agreed to pretty much bury it because of its age. I mean, we've already made exceptions along Broadway from that plan, and it is old. So, I know when other potential developments along Broadway have come up, it's, we've discussed it, and while we didn't officially have a burial and Chris still carries it in his briefcase, or it's probably sitting on his desk. So since he doesn't bring a briefcase anymore, we can only meet virtually. For the most part, it has been buried.
It's essentially been buried, but it's not buried. And I'm just wondering if it's there to cause problems at this point versus guide the city in the direction we want to go in as laid out by the comprehensive plan.
I think just from I don't speak for Doug, but kind of from a staff administration standpoint, I think it would make sense for the plan commission to have that discussion about whether or not to remove it and replace it with something else, whatever that may be in the future.
A formal vote to remove it rather than just bury it. Okay. I didn't realize that we could formally vote to just kill it. Okay.
And again, I'm not, what could replace it could be any number of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be another corridor area plan. It could be a specific zoning district that's unique to the, that your parcels that you want to involve in it. You could craft a separate zoning category just for those geographical parcels that provides, more prescriptive detail than perhaps the CDD does today about the uses you would allow by right, meaning, all the developer has to do is walk in and, if they're proposing a retail use, then they just need to get a permit from Doug to put in that retail use, all the way up to, a conditional use that may be allowed depending if they meet certain criteria, to uses that you would absolutely prohibit. So there are any number of different ways that you could structure that zoning district or a different corridor plan for that area. So there are a number of options that the Planning Commission could talk about.
Chris, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I've just got so many comments now built up. First one on the, let's see, where should I start? Let's start with the corridor plans. They were incredibly useful. I think I see Kathy Thomas on this. She might have chaired, or I know she's on Plan Commission when the Broadway corridor plan was developed. For those that don't recall, when the Beltline was relocated, we inherited, and it was literally a line of gas stations and dumpy looking buildings. It was a horrible place. And the Broadway corridor plan was the vision of the city to say, what are we going to do? Because this area, and the city had the foresight in those areas to not only develop the plan, but invest money in Broadway. And at the time I was wondering, I think it was $1 million a phase to rebuild Broadway. But by the time we were done, we built it and they came. And without that, they wouldn't have. So that's another great example for a TID that was very successful. That TID money was used to rebuild Broadway, and the businesses didn't even want to be there until we rebuilt it. But then we're able to bring them up a little at a time to what we have today. And what we have today is completely different than what it was 30 years ago. And then the same thing happened for our Monona Drive guidelines. We did that because Monona Drive, if you don't remember, used to look like a Vegas Strip. There was billboards and flashing signs and things all over it, and curb cuts. My goodness, it was one of the most dangerous stretches of road in the state because there were so many curb cuts. It was the Wild West there. Anybody wanted a curb cut, they could put it in. There was maybe more curb cuts than curb on Monona Drive. So we did develop, as part of that, the Monona Drive design guidelines as well as the Monona Drive corridor guidelines, and they have been fabulous in reshaping Monona Drive to what it is today. I wish we could maybe, Doug, sometime, if we have old pictures of Monona Drive, what it looked like and what it looks like now. They were fabulous tools. Now, talk about the CDD zoning. You all know I like it, and I like it because it has a lot of flexibility. We have so many things we can do. The problem is, it's a lot of responsibility for us too. It's a lot of work for us to enforce it. And that's what some people are obviously having issues with right now. But the flexibility allows us to react really quickly to development proposals and things people want to do. As far as Brian's idea of we could have a very prescriptive ordinance and people just go and get a zoning permit, I'd hate that because there's no conditional use. A conditional use is really our ability to negotiate with applicant to bring a site up. Many times we haven't. I'm sorry?
I do have to disagree with you on one small part, though. That the conditional use permit process has changed in state statute over the last couple of years, so it provides municipalities less ability to negotiate with the developer over the proposed uses. The way it's set up in the state statute now is if a developer meets the different criteria that are established in your conditional use zoning district, you have to give them the permit, even if you don't like the use. So that's why I don't love conditional use permits either.
But we can negotiate about what they're going to do with their parking lot, their landscaping, all the things that are not completely prescriptive in our ordinance right now. We have the ability to put conditions on a use, which we don't have once we make it wholly prescriptive. And it's always served the city well to be able to have a conditional use. It's allowed us to really, I would say, build up Monona Drive and Broadway corridor. That's what we're mainly talking about to where they are today. So, and as far as the corridor plans, absolutely Broadway corridor plan is old. And it should be a discussion with Plan Commission, see if that's still our community's vision. There's things in there that may not be, but to have some plan many times is better than to have nothing. It's a starting point. Now, most of the development proposals that have come to the city, if you've noticed, they've looked at the corridor plan. They say, well, we've hit these elements and this is what we're looking for. And here's what we're looking for, maybe a little exception or variance to that, which again, the Plan Commission has incredible authority to do that. And a lot of communities, all we can do is, all Plan Commission would do would make a recommendation to the city council. In Monona, we've been given an incredible amount of authority to be able to be the final voice in what those developments are. Some communities don't do that. They'll look for a recommendation from the Plan Commission, but the city council will look at every proposal and they'll decide if it meets their vision, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, these are a lot of big topics and I love them. And I think we absolutely should revisit the corridor plans, but as staff has mentioned, it's a lot of time and it's a lot of money. And sometimes maybe we just look at the parts we don't like and say, let's adjust this and let's adjust that, because that's not where we're at today, 30 years later. And that might be a much easier way to do it rather than just saying we'll throw it away or we'll start from scratch.
Right. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions, comments? Tom Stolper, you've been listening this whole time. Do you want to introduce yourself? Want to click on your camera and say hi since not everybody here knows you?
No, I don't need to do that. And you're having a great meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
Miss us, Tom?
Kathy Thomas, did you want to say something?
You're muted.
You're muted. You're muted.
Still muted.
Some people think it's a blessing when I'm on mute. I want to reinforce a little bit about what Chris had to say, but I do want to say that, and for those of you who don't know, I probably chaired the Plan Commission for 20 years. The system that we have, flawed as it may be, has gotten us, as Chris said, I can remember when we had fast food joints all up and down Monona Drive, and we had pylon signs out at the street. But what has gotten us where we are is the quality of the people that sit on the Plan Commission and what they are able to do with the tools that they have. And I was going to say before Chris mentioned it, there are things about the Broadway Corridor Plan that nobody ever paid. We don't have shake shingles and we don't have any of that stuff. But there are elements in it that are useful. And if someone could reduce it and get rid of those things that no longer make sense and keep those things that do, to give you the tools to do the kind of decision making and that you did tonight, it's really impressive the way you guys all worked through all of that and came up with different reasons with sound rationale with the tools that you were given. So, I mean, I like our system. I think it served us well. I think you serve us well. And so, you know, tinker around the edges with the tools.
Thank you. In the interest of time, because I know it's been a long meeting, but again, I appreciate everybody joining us this evening and spending the time. I hope people found it worthwhile. And again, this won't be the only shot. We'll continue the conversation, continue the education. But Brian and Doug, I want to thank you again for taking the time tonight to join us and put this presentation together. And commission members, I want to thank you again for being so deliberative in the conversations tonight and for listening to this conversation as well. So thank you. Unless there's something else we want to say about economic development tonight, I'd like to move on to the next item. Does that work for everybody? Okay. Reports of staff and commission members.
Thank you. So I'll keep this brief as well. There are a few zoning permit applications moving through. We have both the WPS and the high school have both submitted their formal applications. So they'll be going to Viabeca for full review of stormwater. I'm expecting those to be the second meeting in February, the 22nd. We do have one application that would like to be heard on the 8th. It's a pre-hearing for a zoning permit with Four Lakes Yacht Club. They're looking to do both exterior and interior renovations, new cladding, a new sort of outdoor pergola type space as well. So I had suggested that a pre-hearing in advance of the formal hearing would be appropriate for that. So at this point, that is penciled in for the February 8th. We have those materials in place.
Okay, great. Anything plan commission requests for Doug this evening? Seeing none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Chris, I won. I'll leave you with that.
I'm sorry?
I won with the guess